Welcome, folks, to this week's edition of Tech Sales Advice. This is the LinkedIn Live show for pre-sales professionals and pre-sales leaders. I am, of course, your host, Chris White. And folks, these are live conversations. As I like to say, these conversations are unscripted, unrehearsed, and unpredictable. And today we're going to be talking about pre-sale skills that transcend any industry, any organization, any technology. And we have the perfect guest to have this conversation. I'm joined today by Ron Whitson. Ron is the VP of Global Sales Engineering Services. Did I get that right, Ron?
Yeah, I get paid by the letter, so.
Okay. Also known as GSES, with a company called Seismic. If you're not familiar with Seismic, they are a sales enablement platform. And Ron has the most interesting pre-sales journey, and we're going to hear a little bit about that today. Ron, my friend, welcome. Thank you for being here. How are you?
I'm doing well, Chris. Thank you very much for inviting me to your show. I've been following you for a while. I'm really excited and honored to be a guest on it. So thanks.
Well, man, I'm telling you, I'm delighted to have you. You hit my radar. And in fact, when you and I first started chatting, I told you that I reached out to you because all of a sudden I started seeing all these things on LinkedIn that you were posting, and you inspired me to reach out. And you said, honestly, Chris, I just had this inspiration to start putting stuff out there. And next thing I know, like, people are inviting me to talk, and it's amazing how just doing a little bit sort of just gets you on the radar, right?
That's absolutely right. We've got this great tool at Seismic called Live Social. Allows you to curate some content and schedule it. And like the old Ronco commercials back in the day, set and forget it. I spent some time Monday, and it was an intentional effort at the beginning of last year to get myself out there more. I mean, I've not been the best
Mm.
networker. I think a lot of people who are really good SEs have a little bit of that introverted tendency. I certainly
Mm.
did. We just want to do our job, right? And then go and get back in our little shell. But I started putting some stuff out there, and it's been just absolutely amazing how much more I've gotten out of it. I've spoken to other leaders in the industry like yourself. I've been able to network with other leaders and have some really cool discussions. Plus, I've been having a lot of great conversations with people who are looking to break into this role. So
Mm.
it's been amazing. It's been a lot of fun. And again, Live Social is a great tool from Seismic. So, check it out.
So let's talk about breaking into pre-sales. I told you before you and I met for the first time, I was sort of glancing at your LinkedIn profile, and I was pretty amazed at some of the stops that you had made along the way before you got it, before you joined Seismic, and some of them were very high tech, industries, very high tech platforms and technologies you were working with.
Right.
Do you mind sharing with the audience out there how you got into pre-sales and a little bit about your journey?
Sure. I mean, it starts way back in October of 1998. This is a long time for a lot of people, but yeah, it's literally 25 years of doing this now. But I had 10 years in IT before I got into doing this and doing absolutely everything. I got in with a great company that let me tackle anything I wanted to tackle. So I've been a database administrator. I've actually developed code. I've developed software curriculum. I've trained people on software. I was actually the guy walking around inside of an office building with RAM chips and an anti-static wrist guard, putting RAM chips on the motherboard to increase memory. So I mean, you name it, I've done it. And then my dear friend Shane Phillips, he went to work for a company called Main Control, and we had worked together previously. He called me up. He says, "Hey Ron, there's this thing called a sales engineer." He says, "I think you'd like it, and I think you'd be good at it." I'm like,
Hmm.
"Oh, okay, let's go check it out." So jumped on a plane, flew to Washington, D.C. The company was based out of McLean, Virginia. Met with a lot of people there and had some great conversations. And they said, yeah, let's go ahead and, try this guy. Now, they were hiring two Texans to do sales engineering, which is either a good decision or a bad decision, depending on what you think. But anyway, and so the job was in basically just go and see Shane do his thing and start figuring out my spin on it. And that's
Hmm.
how I got into it. And here's an interesting stat for you. So again, literally 25 years of doing this, it's really just been four jobs
Wow.
because it's been companies being acquired. We can talk a little bit about that. But there was one company in there that was a totally bad fit for me, and it was just 9 months. So really, 25 years of doing this, it's really just been four jobs because it's been companies being acquired. We can talk a little bit about that. But there was one company in there that was a totally bad fit for me, and it was just 9 months. So really, 25 years of doing this, it's really just been four jobs 24 years and 3 months is just 3 jobs. So
Wow, that's impressive. That's impressive. But by the way, I see we have somebody saying hello, Michael Falato. I hope I'm saying that right. And there's Lillian. Hi, Lillian. Nice to see you. Folks, we don't actually see who's out there. So if you care to say hello, please feel free to do so. If you have any questions for Ron, please do so. Ron, talk about your transition before you joined Seismic. You were with a pretty high tech company. Can you talk a little bit about that company and that role as a sales engineer in that sort of
sure.
phase of your career?
Sure, but let's rewind a little bit further because the
Please.
first job I went into, and because I like this story too, the first job I went into, again, was this company called Main Control, about 200 people, and it was IT asset management. Now, where did this all stem from? Back in the day, before Y2K, IT was a black hole. You had a couple of guys down
Mm.
in the basement. If they needed something, nobody knew what they really needed. Go buy this server, go do this. They're spending money, lights out, right?
Slide pizzas on the door, under the
That's all you
door,
had to
right,
do.
and leave them alone.
They kept it running, right? A little Mountain Dew every now and then, they're fine. And what happened was, as the year 2000, the Y2K stuff was approaching, business leaders were going to IT and they're like, "Hey, are we okay?" And the IT guys were like, "Yeah, I think we're okay." Well, what do you mean? Well, it's probably gonna be okay. And this is when businesses start understanding, okay, we've got to get some business controls around IT. So you see
Mm,
things like ITIL and some other standards start to arise.
yeah.
So this company, Main Control, had this idea that we would track the IT assets that we have, how they were purchased, and then how
Mm.
are they currently configured. So this goes back to when you had software agents running on the machine that report back licenses and RAM and all those kinds of
Oh
things. And
yeah.
we would actually tell people about, hey, this is important to understand this. And this goes to another problem, right? There were companies who were allowing people to lease thousands of laptops. Oh yeah, we'll make you this great deal. Here's 1,000 laptops, Chris, and $20 a month, whatever, for a 3-year lease. But then at the end of 3 years, they come knocking on the door. They want their laptops, and you're like, okay, I don't even know. I don't
We
even
have
know
no we
where
have
they
no
are.
idea where
No.
they are. Yeah.
So that was the first thing I learned how to sell as a sales engineer. It was a
Mm.
terribly ugly solution. I mean, it was one step away from scraping a green screen. But we had really smart people showing it, and we had a really good story to tell. So that really helped
Mm.
the storytelling aspect of what I'm able to bring to the table.
Mm.
Because when you don't have pretty software, you got to have something else.
I
So we
tell you.
became really good at whiteboarding and telling the story.
Yeah.
That company was acquired by MRO Software. MRO Software was about 800 people at the time.
Mm.
Very prestigious software and it's still alive today. With their flagship software called Maximo. Now, Maximo was work management. Now, when we got acquired, and I've always done this in acquisitions where there's been by design or just the way my brain works, but I looked over there and said, "Oh, that looks pretty cool. I want to go learn that." And so I
Mm.
actually stepped over and started learning how to show this maintenance software. Now, maintenance software, Maximo, what it is a work order tracking
Mhm.
system. So you're
Mhm.
in an office building and the water fountain starts shooting water out of the side or whatever. You need a ticket to go fix that. So this is what Maximo does. And up to that point, they had been doing very feature focused, screen focused. Okay, there's this field, there's this, that, the other. And I thought, let's put a little bit of a day in the life story around this. So
Awesome.
that worked out really, really well. But here's the other cool thing. Main Control was selling to an IT audience. Maximo
Mm.
was selling to a maintenance audience. Like, oh, this is really interesting. The audience is different. They want the same thing. They want a solution to their problem, but they're not playing, smartest person in the room all the time.
All right.
IT people kind of do that to each other.
Oh
We
yeah.
shouldn't do that. We should be friends, but that happens. But the maintenance guys were tough in a different way. If they smelled any BS, they'd call you out on it right away because we're talking
Mm.
guys, working on equipment for years at a time, and they just don't have time to, mess with the people who are not telling them the right story.
Mm.
So that was a really good fit. That worked out well. That company then, MRO Software, got acquired by IBM. That was amazing for me. They actually gave me the opportunity to go through their management training program, and it
Mm.
was great. It's the first and only time I've shown up at the airport, and there's a person there with my name on a sign. Guy drives me
I
up
love
to.
it.
Oh, it was,
That's a great
I
feeling, right?
made it right. I'm here. Look at me, mom. But they drive you up to Armonk, and there's classrooms where you're learning
Mm.
all week long, and then there's a cafeteria, and it was an amazing experience. So I really appreciate that. Um, I'll try to hurry up the story a little bit. I know we only have
Please,
an hour.
I don't want you to feel rushed in the least, man. Carry
I
on.
know you couldn't get the 2 hours there, but that's fine. We'll do it later. But but anyway, I needed to move on from that company, and ended up at a competitor selling the same kind of thing, and that was the bad fit. That was just 9 months, and then this company, very small company, Avara, it was 80 people out of Burlington, Ontario. They were looking for a
Mm,
senior sales engineer. They had a guy who was getting ready to retire, and they had a big concern that it was going to be a very long ramp for someone to come up to speed on this software. Now,
mm,
this is the really technical stuff that we were talking about when we spoke about this. This was called reliability centered maintenance, or RCM. It's almost like a religion, and the idea is that
mm,
back in the late 50s, early 60s, when the big silver birds were flying across the country and lots of people in them, they thought it would be really good if the big silver bird stayed in the sky, and so the jets continued turning and things like that. So this reliability centered maintenance was developed, and the whole idea was you define the function of a piece of equipment, and then you
mm,
define all the ways that that function could fail, a functional failure, and then you come up
mm,
with ways to mitigate the risk of that failure. Super detailed stuff. And you're looking at things like pressures, vibration analysis, temperature readings, and you're using all these things to understand when you may be trending towards that functional failure. And you want to
mm.
avoid that, obviously. Yeah, that's what the software did. So
Wow.
it was fairly deep. But again, I'm a professional SE, so I just kind of jumped in, started learning it, started figuring out, okay, what's my spin on this story? How would I explain this to somebody?
Mm,
And got up to speed inside of, gosh, I guess it was inside of 3 months. It was 3 months when I gave the first demo, but I was ready to go a little bit before that. Anyway, the guy who was wanting to retire was super happy because he didn't have to wait around all summer long. He's ready to take off. But that was cool, and that really gave me some amazing opportunities to see stuff like the natural light lab. I've walked around in some very cool manufacturing places where I couldn't take pictures
mm.
because it was the F-35 fighter they were working on. I got
Wow.
to walk around in a nuclear power plant, not the bad
Mm.
part of it, but the parts that you can walk around in. So it's this job has afforded me some amazing opportunities, and I think one of the things that helped me with learning this very, very technical software was coming into it with beginner's mind and new eyes,
Mm,
and not just accepting, okay, this is how we've shown it in the past. It's like
mm,
I think sometimes as sales engineers we get hung up on, we know our stuff so well, and I don't think we take enough time to think about if someone has never seen this before.
mm.
They
I
don't know
love
what
that.
that screen means. They don't know what that field, and we I think sometimes we run the risk of making some assumptions. So
Always do we.
So one of the things that I've done is kind of peel it back a little bit. It's like, okay, someone's seeing the screen with all these pressures and all these temperatures. What's the best way to introduce them into that? And the other thing that you got to think about, and this comes from teaching people software and all the different ways that people learn. The other thing that we have to think about is when someone sees something, their eyes are going to start in different places, and they're going to start interpreting what's on the screen in their own perspective. You got to
Mm,
work hard to control that.
mm,
So anyway, I was doing that. That was really cool to show and sell. Got to fly to Australia with like a week's notice because they need somebody over there for a big deal. It's like, well, I live next to the big airport on purpose. So got over there and had an amazing time of that. And they actually did let the Texan drive the car in Australia, which was super freaky being on the wrong side of the road, right? The wrong side of the car. And then
I have never done that, by the way. I'm
it's
too
weird.
afraid to do so.
It's just weird. It's just weird. But the weird thing too is I'm driving down the road and it's like there's dead kangaroos on the side of the road. And that's just a thing, right? And it's like, okay, well here in Texas you drive down the road, maybe there's a dead deer on the side of the road, but it's not a kangaroo. So anyway, just just cool experiences. But the last so the last little jump then. So that company got acquired by Bentley Systems. Bentley Systems, great company. It's actually the oldest software company in North America. They do a bunch of CAD CAM stuff and
Mm,
manufacturing process and building process management. And they wanted their whole idea was we've got software to design the building, help you manage the project of building the building. Let's
mm.
add some software to keep the building nice and shiny. So that's why they wanted to pull the maintenance stuff in.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And so the reason I had to leave there was at the time, I don't know if this has changed since then, but at the time, they came to us and they said, well, listen, we've made the decision to put the pre-sales resources up under the services organization. I said, that's not a good idea. I don't like that idea.
Interesting.
And the person who I was going to report to had never done pre-sales, and their idea was, well, if I'm not busy doing my pre-sales stuff, I could help out with implementations. I don't want to do implementations. I've done that before. That's
So you are touching on something that we could spend the entire rest of today
yeah,
just talking about that. But continue.
yeah,
This may have to be a follow-up conversation between us.
anytime. But yeah, that's not what I wanted to do, right? And I said, well, let me ask you this question: if a pre-sales opportunity comes up for a demo and I'm tied up doing this, what are you going to do? Oh, I'll just get one of the implementation guys to handle the demo. Okay,
Wrong.
time to start looking around for something else. So I ended up with an opportunity to talk to an incredible guy, a good friend of mine named Brian Ivanovic, and he was at the time leading the sales engineering team at Percolate. I should say solution consulting team because we were going under that moniker there.
Mm-hmm.
And Brian and I have this great initial conversation. And at the end of it, he's talking about, well, what he really wants is someone to be able to maintain the demo environments and do that kind of work. It's like, Brian, that's not me. I'm the guy you want in front of your customers. I want to be, involved in deals. I'm like, thanks very much. If something like that comes open, let me know. And he says, well, hang on a minute. And Brian, bless his heart, actually created an opportunity for me to join his team as a remote sales engineer. And I was the first and only remote sales engineer they had. Just a real cool follow-up to that. A few years later, one of the founders and I were talking. He says, wait a minute, you're remote, right? I'm like, yeah. He says, doesn't feel like you're remote. I said, okay, I'm doing it right then.
That's really good.
I've been remote for 25 years. So when the pandemic hit, the only thing that happened was I didn't get to go cool places anymore, which is still kind of a bummer, right? I like to get out and travel.
Indeed.
So anyway, the big thing came up about, okay, well, as part of hiring onto Percolate, we're going to have you come to New York and we're going to present, Percolate to us. I said, no, I'm not going to do that. They said, what do you mean? I said, I'm not going to show Percolate to you. I don't know Percolate. You know Percolate. It's not going to work out well. I said, I'll show you what I'm showing now, the very detailed maintenance stuff. They said, well, we don't know that. I said, that's fine. You need to see me do my thing. This is the way to go. And so that's what they allowed me to do. Now, I did show up, and Brian tells the story better than I do, but I did show up with an orange tie, which was on brand color. And I had orange folders for the people in the room with, my resume and some other stuff in there. But I went through this overview demo of what the maintenance package was. And one of the cool things was one of the sales guys, one of the sales leaders was leaving the room. And he stopped me. He says, listen, I don't know anything about maintenance, but after that, I feel like I do. It's like, okay, that's what a professional SE can do. And so it was weird, right? They had a lot of concerns about, because Percolate, I didn't say this, but Percolate was a marketing solution. And so they had a lot of concerns about, well, Ron, you don't have a marketing background. You haven't done marketing. And my retort to that was, that's okay. I'm a professional SE. I'm going to learn the package. I'm going to tell the story, and then away we go. And I was able to talk myself into the opportunity to present. They liked the presentation, hired me on board as a senior sales engineer. Then later that year, I got the opportunity to lead that team. And then the Seismic acquisition happened in November of 2019. And I kind of did the same thing, right? I start looking around. It's like, what can I do here? What can I provide some value? And so Brian Cotter and I got to talking, and he was telling me about this team he's got, Global SE Services, GSES. And he was wanting to put some more energy and focus into that. It was just a couple of people, and he was trying to lead it, but he's, has a bunch of other things that he's working on.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, that sounds really interesting, Brian. So it's been great. We started with about 4 people on the team back in December of 2019. And currently we're about 16 people with plans to add to the team. And we do a number of things, right? We've got an associate SE program that I'm very proud of. We've actually put 10 SEs into the field here at Seismic in just over 3 years.
Wow.
We've got 2 principal sales engineers who help our partner organization. And then we've got a number of architects and specialists. Our program, our platform is actually getting pretty wide, breadth-wise now. And so these people are able to help the field SEs with some more detailed questions, InfoSec, integration questions, things like that.
Man, what a journey.
long-winded answer. Sorry.
What a journey and what a story. No, I love it. And Ron, you said a bunch of things that I want to pick apart.
Yeah.
Before we do, there's a few people that I just, Salvin and Frank Ivy and Lisa chimed in, and Rakesh and Lillian and Rashi. Folks, thank you so much for your comments, your questions. If you do have some questions, we'll try to get to them. Ron, there's one term that you used a couple times that I want to double click on, and that is professional SE. Because here you started out selling in essence to the IT folks, then you were selling to maintenance professionals, then you were selling this RCM thing to these people who are basically responsible for keeping, what do you call it, the flying
Big silver birds.
the big silver bird, keeping the big silver birds safely up in the air, and more importantly, landing them safely on the ground. Then you were given the opportunity to present and basically do a demo for a team that sells a marketing platform. And rather than try to demonstrate their platform to them, which, by the way, I love that part of the story, right? Like, I'm not going to demonstrate your solution that I understand. Let me demonstrate something that you don't know anything about. And if you can walk away from that with some idea of not only what the problem is, but what our solution are, like, how likely am I to be able to demonstrate anything else, right? So let's begin to pick this apart.
Okay.
When I say to you, what are those skills that define a professional sales engineer, regardless of the industry or the company that they work for? What's the first thing that comes to mind for you?
First thing is being able to just be a friendly human who can have a conversation. Now, going beyond that is the ability to read the room, right? So if you're presenting to a bunch of maintenance people, that is one mindset that you have to have, and one even vocabulary that you would have to use. You walk into a C-level meeting, that's going to be a little bit different, right? You don't need to dive as deep on the demo. You're going to spend more time talking about the overall benefit to the organization. So again, it's friendly human who can have a conversation. Conversation is how we convince people that we are someone who they should buy from. But that whole piece to me is again, knowing your audience, understanding your purpose, those types of things. That'd be the first one.
So powerful, and I do want to pick that part even a little bit further. So first, you mentioned the friendly human, and it's interesting. In some of the comments we've seen, we've had a few people say you're the friendliest person they know. So there. But look, I think there's a lot to be said for being a friendly human. You really do have to be someone who likes people, enjoys engaging with people, and looks for the good. I think there's a certain amount of optimism there,
Absolutely.
right? And the ability to have a conversation, and more importantly, to remember that when we do get the opportunity or have the opportunity to speak with customers, it's not just us talking at them, right? And conversations have to be two directional, right?
Absolutely. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. There's a proportion there, right?
I love that.
But I think the other thing about the friendly human is check the ego at the door. I've been in so many meetings, more typically early on than lately, but where you've got someone in the room and their sole, goal there appears to be to disrupt you, to try to one up you on something. And if you engage with that person in that game, you're never going to win. You're never going to win.
Exactly.
You've got to just check it. And this is a absolutely true story, because I don't make up anything, right? These are always true stories. I'm in this meeting and there's this one person who is just that disruptor, and they are constantly going on and having to one up and all this kind of stuff. And they took us down such a different path that I looked at my seller and I said, listen, it appears that we may be here for the wrong purpose today. We had come in with a plan that we had developed with you guys to show these things. That doesn't appear to be what you guys are looking to see. In the interest of time, I think it would make sense for us to just go ahead and end the meeting early, and we'll reevaluate. And the champion in the room said, well, wait a minute. No, this is what we want to see. And they actually shut down the person who was the disruptor.
I love that.
But if I had engaged with that person and just played their game, we wouldn't have gotten through the detail that we need to get through in the meeting, and we
Mm-mm.
wouldn't have advanced the way we needed to advance. So
Mm-mm.
again, when you're friendly, you got to check some of that as you're going in. If you've had a bad day, that's tough. We're all going to have bad days. You got to kind of check that and understand what is your purpose. And when I'm in meetings, whether it's like this over the interwebs or I'm in person, there's a lot of energy spent putting those connections out and trying to get some, some warm fuzzies back from your audience. And if you
Mm,
find that cold, prickly person, then you throw some more energy that way because you're trying to win these people over to your side.
mm.
That's much more difficult in the virtual world. But here's another good story for you. We did a thing with Brian Ivanovic. Wanted to make sure I told this story. Um, we had a big meeting with Krispy Kreme, right? And for
Mm.
whatever reason, I was remote, and my sales guy Joe was on premise with them. So that morning, I got up early, ran to my local Krispy Kreme place, got the goofy little paper hat that they have, and I got a box of donuts. So when the camera came on, here's the box of donuts right here, and I'm in the hat. That was a way to kind of be the friendly human, make that connection, try to win some
Mm.
people over to my side. So
I so love that. Yeah, and, honestly, check your ego at the door it's one of my favorite sayings. And what comes with this is a great deal of emotional intelligence, EQ as people call it, and a certain level of maturity, right? One of the things I like to say is, there are times that we need to be the smartest person in the room, but there are times when we need to let the people that we're speaking with and meeting with know that we recognize them as being the smartest people in the room. And the other thought that came to mind, Ron, when you were sharing that story about how you had what I'll just politely call an antagonist in the room,
do it, put it.
who was being difficult, probably trying to make you look bad. The courage that it took for you to say, actually, you know what? Maybe we're we're wasting our time here, right? Maybe our expectations were out of line with your expectations, and we'd be better just ending early and recalibrating. The courage that it takes to do that. And by the way, this is an experience that I've had when your customers start to get a little bit negative, shall we say. Sometimes I'll be like, I mean, okay, it sounds like you guys have a good solution then, and maybe we don't, maybe you don't need another solution. Oh, wait a minute, we didn't say
Yeah,
that,
right.
right? Like, no, like come back. Okay, well then let's have a conversation, right? So no, that's fantastic. But by the way, Ron, there's so many great comments. I just want to call attention to a few. Frank Tisolano, he's actually going to be a guest in a few weeks. Good listening skills, situational fluency. Let's see, Rakesh is chiming in. Value-led storytelling. Lillian is chiming in with lots of things. I want to go back to, you mentioned read the room. What do you do in particular? And you mentioned in person versus virtual.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you're doing to better read the room in online meetings?
Um, Always have my camera on,
Mm, amen.
regardless,
Amen.
and because that will give a little bit of peer pressure, maybe to have other people turn their
Mm.
camera on, and
Do you ever invite people to join you? If you come onto a meeting with your camera on and the people you're meeting with don't, because this was a debate that I had the other day on
I saw
LinkedIn. You
that.
probably
I saw
saw it.
that.
Do you ever either invite people to join you on LinkedIn or on video rather? Do you ask if they would be willing to? How do you handle that situation?
I haven't asked to this point. I've got my Zoom set up where camera is off when I end the meeting on purpose, but then
Yeah.
I turn it on pretty quickly. And it's got to be 80% of the time other people will turn theirs on as well. I haven't asked this point, but I did follow that debate the other day. I've been trying to consider, would I ask about that?
Yeah.
Um, but that would be the first thing, right? Because there are visual things that you'll see. There's things you can do as far as like if someone's just sitting there and they've got just their name because they don't have their video on, and they don't really contribute. Asking them a
Mm.
question, a pointed
Oh,
question,
that's good.
that's a good
Yeah.
way to pull in. Now, to be able to do that, you really kind of need to listen and take some notes about their introductions up
Mm.
front because you can't ask them some disconnected random question. You need something that would be really thought provoking, and obviously not a close-ended question. You want them to elaborate a bit. And then the other thing, and again, I think this is something that you develop over time, is just understanding the interactions between the people on the team.
Mm,
Sometimes someone's title may not really inform you as to what their role is as part of this selection committee. They may have more power than their role demonstrates. And I've seen people not give enough uh, credence to that because of the title. And then later on it's like, oh wow, yeah, that was the person who had all the juice. So
totally.
it's things like that. Again, 1,000 times more difficult in the virtual world, but there are things that we can do to kind of help us with that situation. but
Well,
but again, it also just goes down to the conversation too. If you are someone
mm,
who can have that conversation and pull stuff out of people, and whether it's stuff about sports or the weather or whatever, that's how we start the conversation with somebody. You're always get to the business stuff, and yes, you got to have some of the what do you call it, the some of the noise up front, but you've got to demonstrate that you're able to do that, and that starts to break down some of those walls, and that's where you'll start getting some information.
yeah. Well, and you keep triggering so many thoughts of mine. The first thought is when we're engaging in that way, the sort of a what I call the preamble or the banter, right? The
Yeah,
sort of the small talk banter. It has to be authentic. But one of the you said checking our ego at the door. And one of the things that I'm inspired to share, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this, is that this can't be it can't be with the wrong motivation or the wrong intent, because I believe that motive is transparent. Like, you
100%.
sincerely have to be interested in getting to know, or at least connecting with people. If they feel like, I mean, you're just trying to warm me up so then you can make your pitch and sell me on something, most people are going to see through that. Do you
Yeah,
agree with that, Ron?
1,000% agree with Chris. Yeah, yeah, and there's a reason this stuff is behind me, right? When I figured out I'm going to be
Mm,
stuck here a lot, it's like, okay, well, let me put some things behind me that maybe people will ask about, and they
ask
have,
about.
and it's created some really cool conversations. Here's a story for you. I took my oldest daughter to New York after she graduated, and we ended up with tickets to the Letterman show. So yeah, she's a little bit older, right? I've got older
Okay.
kids. And to warm us up, the person comes out and they're talking to us, and it's inane stuff, right? It's banter. But here's the thing that made it kind of interesting to me based on what you just said. There was a sign that would light up that would say applause. It's like, really?
Mm.
You got to tell me when to applaud? If you said something funny or applause worthy, I'd probably do it, just out of reaction.
Exactly.
But
That
yeah,
is
if you need
that's
the applause
funny.
sign, maybe that's what we need. Maybe the sign back here that says
I
applause.
mean, that's it. I instantly thought we should have the applause, sign right here. I'm gonna have to work on
I
that.
just showed this feature. Hey, applause.
Exactly. But I mean, the irony is that we could all, like, again, if we had the right intent, if we had the right motive, and that was transparent at all, and I believe it always is, we could almost use that to our benefit. Like, it could almost be so sarcastic that we could use it to our benefit in that regard. I had another question for you, but before we get there, Rashi asked a question. Definitely could see how a SME might be closer to vendor selection than their management team. What are helpful hints to know how weighted their opinion is? So I think the way I'm
Yeah.
reading that is, how can we sort of get a feel for how much influence certain members of the team that we're presenting to might have on the decision makers. Rashi, I hope I'm interpreting that question correctly. I have a few thoughts, but Ron, does anything come to mind for you?
The first thing that comes to mind with me is when you've got that good question that you can ask, right? You could
Mm.
direct it to the manager
Oh,
and see how the manager answers, or does the manager indeed pass it over to someone else? Because I've had that very same
right.
experience where they said, this person over here is who's involved. Let me ask them to, expand on it. So that tells you
Yeah.
right there that's a good indication.
Yeah. I think that's good. And the other thought that comes to mind, Ron, and I'm curious to get your opinion about this as well. I think it's a delicate balancing act, and I'm asked this a lot. We've got decision makers in the room, maybe the manager, the person with the juice, as sometimes we call them, but maybe some of the key technical principals or the SMEs. Oftentimes we'll have some users, maybe some admin folks. But how do we manage and balance all the people in the room and sort of communicate in such a way that keeps everyone engaged? And in particular, one of the mistakes that we make sometimes is I think we placate a little bit too much to the leaders because they're, quote, the decision makers, but we're not satisfying the technical SMEs that they're counting on.
Sure.
The other mistake is we focus too much on the technical SMEs and we're not giving enough sort of business justification or speaking at a level that the decision makers care about, which
Right.
usually has something to do with cost or time or resources or, invest the return on investment or something in that nature. How do you sort of balance those situations?
No, that's a really good question. So the way you got to think about it is you are going to have different types of members in your audience. And let's call it C-level, then let's call it the technical people. And then I would add one more, the users, the people who are going to use the solution on a
Yeah,
day-to-day basis.
yeah,
They all have different things that they want to see. At the end of the day, they all want a solution, but from a different lens. And the C-level is going to be the outcome and the value piece of it, right? What is it going to do? How's it going to make your life better? The technical people are, it fits in our stack, it makes sense, and it works, right? And
exactly.
I say that because I've had some software that didn't always work the way it should, but you got to sell it. And then the third one would be the day-to-day users. They want to see it's simple. I can actually do that, right?
Absolutely.
So with the value piece of it and a lot of that stuff, you've got to set it up front. I'm a slide person, right? So I will have slides up laying out the roadmap for my presentation. And I actually go back and forth between the solution and my roadmap because
Yep.
I do the tell, show, tell thing. Hey, Chris, here's how this is going to provide value. Let's go over here in the product, show you. Land back on that side. Here's how it just provided value. Now let's look at the next thing, right? So
Mm,
that has really worked out well for me, but kind of understanding those different needs of the audience and addressing it that way. Now, you're going to get questions. The technical person's going to go, one level deeper and want their answer. That's fine. When I first started doing this, I thought, here, okay, we'll take a little bit of an off ramp here, a little bit of an off road
a
trip, if you don't
little bit
mind.
of a tangent.
A little bit of a tangent.
All
When I
right.
first started doing this, there wasn't a nice book with 6 habits in it to tell me how to do this. There wasn't the pre-sales collective, right? I had
We
to
had to
figure all
figure
this
it
out
out our own, right?
by stepping in every pile of crap there was and saying, man, I don't want to do that again. How do I avoid that? So my first thing was I'm going with my buddy Shane and watching him. It's like, okay, cool. That's pretty, I can do that. Now, different styles, obviously, but yeah, I understand that. And so early on, I thought, well, okay, now I've got this seller. Let me be sure I'm aligned with my seller. So I do, discovery. I would come up with my outline of why I thought I would present, and I'd share it with my seller because then if we had a
Mm,
bad meeting, they couldn't throw me under the bus. Well, guess what? I did that and I had a bad meeting. It's like, crap, what happened?
yeah.
Oh, my audience's expectations. I've got to align with them. So that informs
Mm,
discovery, maybe even potentially some dry runs. There's a great story of
mm,
a deal at Texas Instruments where we had done such good discovery, had such a complete dry run with the champion that it was almost like a one demo deal, a large deal, but a one demo deal because when we showed up to do the presentation, the audience was like, "Oh my God, this is exactly what we need."
yeah.
So alignment with my seller, alignment with my expectation, with my audience. Okay, I'm good. Oh wait, we still didn't get the deal. Now what's going on? What we don't realize sometimes, I think, as pre-sales professionals, is your demo is not the only one they're seeing. You may
Mm,
crush it and you're high-fiving each other walking out, or you're getting on the Zoom and high-fiving each other afterwards, and you think, "Oh man, that was fantastic." But guess what? The person you just demoed to has got to sit through 3 or 4 more of these things, and they
I know.
all they all do the same thing. You jump on
Mhm.
some screen, "Oh, can you hear me? Oh, let me turn this on." Oh, there, you jack around with that for like 10 minutes, and then finally everybody gets on. Then finally the sales guy starts doing their person, their banter. "Oh, did you see that game last night? Oh, that's amazing." And unrelevant, unauthentic stuff. They say, "Oh, I've just got 5 minutes worth of slides to go through." Then they spend 30 minutes showing you, "Look at all of our logos. Look at how cool we are. You'll see this in the demo. You'll see this in the demo. You'll see this in the demo." They finally stop talking, and the geek who can speak jumps on and starts. And I say that proudly. I say that proudly. You were able to drag me out of the basement and put a nice shirt on and go show up in front of people. But they start doing their things like, oh, this is amazing. Look at this. And this is our whiz banger. And look at this email distribution tool. And at the end of it, you've seen they all look the same. They all sound the same. And your boss comes to you and says, okay, Chris, which one do you think is going to be the one we need to spend, $500,000 on?
I don't
So
know.
I thought, yeah, exactly. And I thought about that. It's like, okay, so if I can be that friendly human, if I can be that person, and if I can, in the product presentation, think about flying along at 30,000 feet, you ask that question, I'm going to dive down, I'm going to answer it, make sure you get what you need, but I'm pulling back on the stick to get back up here. I think that if at the end of these evaluations, if someone says, hey, Chris, what do you think? You're like, well, Ron seemed pretty friendly. I liked him. And software seemed pretty simple. That may be enough to get me to the next stage in the evaluation. And that's worked out pretty well. So we'll pull back onto the main road now.
Honestly, Ron, I mean, here's the irony is that little journey that you just sort of walked, took us through is almost exactly the journey that I went through as I was learning this craft, and it's how the 6 habits were born, and how was it? The 6 habits started as mistakes that I recognized in myself.
Yep.
And I had to figure out a better way to do what I was doing. And to your point, the first started with getting aligned with sales, right? For the first probably 2 or 3 months in this role, I just thought of myself as a guy to just show up and talk technology. I'm just here to show a product, or I'm just here to show technology. In fact, I was here to demonstrate how smart I was. That's like, if I just demonstrate how smart I am, certainly they'll want to work with us, right?
Just throw down the dollars.
Right. I found out very quickly there couldn't be anything further from the truth, right? So I had to accept that I was in sales, that I was actually part of the sales team, right? And then to your point, I was like, all right, now let's just dive in. Oops, wait a minute. I'm aligned with my sales counterpart, but the customers, I had no idea what they were expecting, or I was relying on what I was told by sales. No disrespect to sales, but they don't speak the language that we do.
Exactly.
Right? Now I need to do some discovery, but now that I've done some discovery, now I got to prepare and practice, right? And then we got to get the demo, and then the demo actually has to be memorable, compelling, engaging, and inspiring to the point where they want to do business with you.
Yes.
Right. And then we just need to continue to perfect our craft. Right. So, I mean, you said this in an email, I think a week or two ago, like you basically, followed the same path, but your description there was perfect. Ron, let me push our own pause button here. Let's take inventory just for a moment. Folks, I'm speaking with Ron Whitson. He is the VP of Global Sales Engineer Services with Seismic. He has got a wealth of experience. He's known by people as one of the friendliest men on the planet. And he has a wealth of insights and experience in what it means to be a professional sales engineer. And just to recap, if you haven't been with us, Ron has sold to IT professionals. He has sold to maintenance professionals. He has sold to experts in quality control for airplanes, and now he works with a company that sells to sales professionals and marketing professionals. And along that journey, he's discovered that there's very specific skills that transcend any industry or any technology that we might sell. Now, a few of them that we've talked about: you need to be a friendly human being that can have a conversation. You mentioned the ability to read the room, the ability to convince, the ability to take the complex and tell a compelling story. You mentioned check the ego at the door, before you join the Zoom, as the case may be. Yep. You've used the word purpose a few times. There was one thing that I wanted to ask you about, because I think this is an important distinction to make. And by the way, I do want to thank, I see Lillian and Jason and I can't even, I need my glasses. Pranali, I see all the comments, folks. It's so nice to see all the comments. Thanks so much. We're gonna be going for another 15 minutes or so. So if anybody does have any questions, feel free to ask. Um, I want to go back to this idea of being a human, a friendly human who can have a conversation. I think one of the things that some people get hung up on, and I think one of the things that people struggle with a little bit is is I've heard of people who are almost so friendly and so personable that they're maybe a little uncomfortable with the selling side of this
Mhm.
business, and they fail to like go from friendly conversation to, at the end of the day, we do have a job, which is to present and convince the people that we're presenting to that our solution is the right solution, and as I like to say, help them become convinced themselves. So
Right.
have you ever seen this before, and what advice would you give to somebody who says, I love the friendly part, I'm not as comfortable with the selling part?
I say it all the time. I say it all the time. And again, I think that some of the people who make the best sales engineers have that little bit of introversion, right? And so if someone were to come to you and say, "Hey, I'm gonna get you a sales role," you're like, it's anathema. It's just not your personality. It's not what you would do. So a little trick is, and it's not a trick. First of all, you have to believe in the solution you're presenting.
Amen.
Again, one of the reasons why I had to blast off at the place I was only for 9 months, and I don't say their name, but a lot of people know it. You can see on my activity. Anyway, um, you have to believe in it because you said something earlier about that comes through. It's transparent. If you don't
Motives
believe in your
transparent.
solution,
Yeah.
you can do the best demo you want to do. People are going to read that. So that's the first thing. Now, if you
Mm,
do believe in it, then what you have to understand is you're not selling that person. You're actually helping them make an improvement to their business and
mm,
actually their life. If you can
mm.
believe that, then the selling piece of it is just the benefit of you helping them solve the solution. If
I
you
love
can't
that.
believe in it, then you're the used car salesperson saying, "Hey, look at this cream puff only driven by an old lady on Sunday to church or whatever." That's not what we are. We are truly those technical advisors who help people understand how this solution is going to make their business and their life better. Um, that that's it for me. I mean, yes, I'm a salesperson. Yes, I've made a nice living doing this over time, but I don't consider it's weird. I'm a sales engineer. I'm very proud of that title. I know there's a lot of talk about different names for what we do. Sales engineer works for me. But again, if understand that you're helping to solve a business problem, that
Yeah.
should be enough maybe to get you over that hump of you're not used car salesperson.
I just love that. And look, I mean, you and I have talked quite a few times, and I know you've seen my stuff, so you've probably heard me say on more than one occasion. I mean, I believe to sell is to solve, and I believe that to sell is to serve, and sales is not a four-letter word. Sales is actually a very noble profession.
It is, but
Right.
demo is a four-letter word, so we got to get rid of that.
That's actually a good point. That may be blog worthy. I may have to write a blog.
No,
I
no,
may
no.
have
That's the
to.
title of my book. That's the title of my book.
Oh,
I'm
okay,
not
okay.
working
Well,
on it
then I'm not gonna.
actively.
Then
It's just
okay.
the
Well,
idea.
we need to have that's worthy of another
We'll
conversation.
collaborate on it. Okay.
That's worthy of another conversation. By the way, just a few more people are chiming in. I just love all the comments. Brian Lewis chimed in. I think Brian and you and I have. I think Brian and I have a meeting in a few minutes actually. Yes. A friendly human that can have a conversation. By the way, Brian runs a company called Home Run for Presales. Check him out, guys, if you haven't. I know Frank is chiming in as well. Love all these comments. Yeah, it was so well said, Frank. And by the way, Ron, something you said inspired a thought, and that is, I really believe that as a sales engineer, and by the way, obviously, the name sales engineer is a term that I like because the book, that I wrote is, has the very title in it. I believe we advocate technology to solve business problems. That's really the business that we're in. And you mentioned the problem. I think we need, and I heard this probably a year or two ago, and I just thought it was fantastic. Fall not in love with the product, fall in love with the problem you solve.
There
And
you
if
go.
and if that's your motivation, if that's your passion, that will come through. Um, Ron, if you can believe that, we've already been at this for about 50 minutes.
Too fast.
So the time has just flown by. My good friend Tony Franchetic. Tony, Good to see you, my man. Tony was actually he's been on, I think, 2 or 3 times now. He's a regular guest on the show, and he kicked off the year with the first session this year. Ron, we've only got a few more minutes, so we've used the airplane analogy a few times. I'll use it one more time. The landing gear is out, and we are going to land this plane on time. Any final thoughts? We've been talking about skills that really define a professional sales engineer, that transcend the industry, the product, the people that you sell to. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you think is worth bringing to the surface before we wrap things up?
Yeah, we talked about it briefly, but the idea that a professional sales engineer is able to take in a new solution and create their version of it, simplify it. To be able to simplify something, you've got to know it super well. So, but to be able to, like I did with a bunch of different packages, jump in, immerse yourself in it, but imagine seeing it for the first time. And how would you go about describing that? And the other thing is, when you're describing it, when you're showing it, think about the different learning styles that would exist in your audience: the visual, the auditory, the kinesthetic. Now, people say, oh, there's nothing you do in a demo for kinesthetic. Maybe take a prop. Well, yeah, that's fine. You can do that. And I've done that. I've had props in demos before. That's for another time. But there's language you can use. And when you paint that storytelling is something else that we haven't touched on that's super important. But when you paint that story, the language you use, you can say things and you can use words that will engage with the kinesthetic as well. So yeah, being able to synthesize a simple version of the answer to the problem that you're solving, that's something else that a professional SE needs to have. And then last thing, since we talked about storytelling really quickly, storytelling is not this elaborate exercise where you're charting and like we used to diagram sentences and you've got the hero's arc and then the villain comes in here and chapter 4 is this. That's not storytelling to me. Storytelling is using relevant examples in everyday language of how this solution is going to provide a benefit. And if you got an example of how someone else or another company has done it, that's just bonus stuff. But again, just having a conversation and sharing a story.
I love that. Well, and when I hear you talk about storytelling, what I'm hearing you say is that there's a lot of material and talk about the right way to do discipline, right way to do storytelling, and it's very structured and it should have these pieces and these components, and all of that is fine. But what I hear you saying is it's just using examples and I guess experiences and common language to create, to me, to communicate in an interesting, entertaining way that anybody can understand. I think when you and I were talking, I used to have the rule of thumb, like if I could explain it to my grandmother, then we're at the right level. So that's what I hear you saying. Like and somebody, I think it might have been Lillian who said this in one of the earlier comments. We need to humanize the conversation, 100%. Right? People buy from people. We need to be people communicating with and speaking to people, period. I know we're just about out of time, but I had one more question for you, and that is it possible to get out in front of your skis in terms of trying to leverage only or depend only on these skills that we're talking about? Because my sense is that there's sort of a fine line between having these professional pre-sale skills and enough valid, legitimate knowledge and expertise in the technology or in the industry that you're working, and that we can't, you're not going to succeed only in the pre-sale skills, but there's some other base knowledge or technical background required, and that bar varies depending on
Right.
the industry. Do you agree with that, Ron?
I do, because at the end of the day, the the goal in this meeting where you're presenting your solution is you want to be seen as that trusted advisor. There are 1,000 things that can happen to kick the legs out front of that chair, and one of them is being called out because you don't
Mm.
have that technical basis. If we kind of add one more thing to the bucket around what a professional SE is and what they do, is when I show up. Okay, when I showed up, I had an opportunity. This is my last true story for this one probably, but
And then the rest are going to be untrue.
and then I'll make them up. But when I was at MRO Software with the Maximo tool, we came up with a calibration solution.
Mm,
Calibration is the act of understanding um, an instrument's accuracy. And you
mm.
do that by comparing the instrument to a standard. So the process of here's my standard, I compare it to the instrument, I record some readings, and then I adjust the instrument if I need to. That's the process of calibration. We came up with a brand new calibration solution, and I was the guy who presented it to some PhDs at Los Alamos. Now, you talk about imposter syndrome, right?
Mm.
There's so much more experience in the room around calibration than what I had. I had just kind of learned it. But I went in the mindset of, guys, I don't have to be a calibration expert. I'm an expert in how our calibration tool will help you.
I love that.
And I had to present it from that standpoint. So I hear a lot of people, oh, I've got to understand this industry to the nth degree. And yes, you should have some industry experience, but you're never going to be an expert to the level that your audience is. They've been doing it sometimes for 25 years or whatever. But you can be an expert on your solution and the benefits that your solution provides them. And that was just something that I always kind of hung my coat on. And that gave me the confidence to go into this meeting. They did not stand and applaud at the end of that demo at Los Alamos, but they did applaud. So I felt pretty good about that.
I love that. That's so good. Well, and I was inspired to ask you about that because I do think it's important for anybody who might be listening now or might catch this, in recording, that it's not success is not based only on pre-sales, what we've been calling sales engineer skills. I've always thought it's a three, and you mentioned the leg of the stool. I've always thought it's sort of a three-legged, stool from a skills perspective. There's the technical skills, the technical expertise, the technical knowledge, or the industry knowledge, or the product knowledge. There's the people skills, and then there's the sales skills.
Yep.
And really what we've been talking about is the people skills and the sales skills. Ron, I feel as though I owe it to you to let you go on time. I just want to first say thank you to all the people that we've had chiming in. I have literally lost track of all the comments. Lillian and James and Tony and Frank and Jason, and I'm sure there's other people that I'm leaving off. Thank you so much for all your great comments. I can't wait to go back and take a look. Ron, thank you so much for joining. Any final words in closing as we put a bow on this conversation?
No, appreciate it. It was a lot of fun. Went way too fast. Let's do it again sometime.
Man, I sure hope you'll come back and be a guest again. Folks, thanks so much for joining. If you enjoy these, I encourage you to give us a thumbs up, share it with others. If you want to check out the website, you can go to techsalesadvisors.com and follow the hashtag tech sales advice. We try to do this every Monday. I hope to see you next Monday. Ron, hang around just for a second. I'm going to give you your parting gift. To everyone else, thanks so much. We'll see you
Bye,
again
everybody.
soon. Cheers. Bye-bye.